Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
And there's no margin for error right now.
Troubling trajectory, why daily cases of COVID-19 in BC could double in the coming weeks. Also,
with the virus pivoting, we need to pivot.
Calls to target specific neighborhoods in BC's COVID vaccine distribution. And
without a doubt, this past year has been the most difficult.
Why the Vancouver Aquarium has been sold to an American company and what it means for the facility's future.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. A dire warning tonight. BC could see its daily COVID case count double or even triple by the end of May if the current trends continue.
But for the first time, we are getting a clearer picture on where some of the transmission is being driven. Tanya Fletcher is live with the latest on the modeling data presented today. Tanya, what have we learned?
Yeah, the breakdown by health authority tells the tale of two neighboring regions. So let's start with Vancouver Coastal Health. The pink bar shows the number of sites with clusters, and the gray bar shows the resulting number of cases. So take a look at the very left of your screen. That details restaurants, bars, and lounges, and you can see they're overwhelmingly driving workplace clusters and triggering by far the most COVID cases in the gray. Now let's compare that to right next door in Fraser Health. Again, on the far left. Instead, it's industrial and manufacturing areas that are driving the most workplace clusters. And again, you can see in gray, that's where a large proportion of cases were spread. And similarly, look just two to the right. You can see how many cases, proportional to the pink especially, that's the number of sites, are traced to gyms and fitness centers as well. Now, as far as restaurants go, if that's just among staff, we're wondering, how much of that risk is reflected among patrons as well. Well, we asked Dr. Bonnie Henry how this data drove their decision to close indoor dining, if it was as much for staff as it was for the public dining out.
It was a little bit of both, and that's the more qualitative part of the data that's not reflected in numbers. So the investigations that people were doing, and a lot of that is, restaurants, bars, pubs in Vancouver, but also in Whistler and in the Vancouver coastal area, also a large part in Fraser Health. So it was a combinations of things.
Yeah, very interesting data for sure, Tanya. And we're also seeing a detailed breakdown of variants by health authority?
Yeah, and the variants of concern right now make up roughly 60% of all new cases overall in BC. But let's take a look by health region. In Fraser Health, you can see here, this tells us the proportion. So the red is the B117 variant, and you can see that's where the bulk of the variants are in Fraser Health. The pink, that section there, is the P1 variant originating in Brazil. But right next door at Vancouver Coastal Health, we'll show you here, the P1 variant, you can see it's almost the exact opposite. The P1 variant in the pink is making up instead about 2/3 of the cases, while the B117 is making up just about 1/3. And so, yes, a lot of those Vancouver Coastal Health's P1 cases were centered in Whistler. But Dr. Bonnie Henry pointed out there were several introductions of that variant in the region overall. And next, I want to show you the path we're on that shows what happens if nothing changes. This is our current trajectory, and it shows BC is on pace to hit 2,000 cases a day in the next few weeks and up to 3,000 cases a day within the next month. Now, that's if we continue at 60% of our pre-pandemic interactions. That's the main red line here. If we reduce our interactions to 50%, that's the yellow line, you can see the rate slows but is still on an upward trend. And now look at the blue line. This is our goal here, the kind of safe spot. If we can cut our interactions and those contact rates down to 40%, that is the goal there. And we asked Dr. Henry as well what kind of impact this trend could have on our healthcare system.
We know that as rates go up, 5% of 1,000 is more than 5% of 400. So we will see hospitalizations. And that's why the age-based program is so important, why we need to maintain the protection from vaccination for people down to age 40 in particular.
And finally, as for the vaccines, we now know about 10% of BC's total supply is going to frontline workers like teachers, police, and firefighters. Anita, Mike?
Tanya Fletcher live for us tonight. Thanks, Tanya. And the number of patients in hospital with COVID-19 is climbing higher, setting a new record as the province records another 1,200 cases today. There are now 409 people in hospital with 125 in critical care. There have also been 3 more COVID-19 related deaths. But the vaccination effort continues, with BC immunizing around 45,000 people yesterday, setting a new record for single-day vaccinations.
And joining us a little later in this newscast to talk about BC's latest numbers is the Canada 150 Research Chair in Mathematics, Killeen. We'll be asking her about COVID-19 modeling and the direction BC is heading in if social interactions don't slow down.
And tomorrow night's game between the Vancouver Canucks and the Edmonton Oilers has been postponed. It would have been the Canucks' first action since a COVID outbreak ravaged the team. The postponement comes a day after JT Miller publicly voiced his worries for the safety of the team. In a statement, the league says the decision to delay was made to provide team, staff, and players with more time for recovery and preparation. Canucks general manager Jim Benning says some players have not yet been cleared to resume training and need more time to recover from the effects of the disease. Yesterday, Miller called the quick return to play kind of crazy, stressing the focus should be on the health and safety of the players and their families and not the playoffs. A revised schedule is expected to be released by tomorrow.
There are stronger calls tonight for the province to start targeting hotspots when it comes to vaccine distribution, in particular areas of Surrey.
As Zara Premji reports, that city has led the way when it comes to case numbers for nearly the entire pandemic.
Is there anything that will not?
Surrey is home to a high number of frontline workers. Part of the reason for a spike in cases here throughout most of the pandemic.
The numbers are the highest within Surrey, and Surrey really has increased its numbers since the end of February until now.
And while teachers in Surrey were prioritized for vaccines in response to this, and now first responders in Surrey and White Rock, Dr. Johanna says that's not enough.
I think we need to vaccinate people again in those area code hotspots, similar to what Ontario's been doing, and also at workplaces. But having said that, we do have an issue of vaccine supply.
And the province acknowledges Surrey is still its biggest concern.
So Surrey's been a priority from the beginning, and it is a priority now.
But there are hurdles.
We cannot do a city, the population of Surrey all at once. We just don't have the vaccine, and we need to be able to address people at risk all over the province. But it is the most challenging area right now, for sure.
And Henry says neighborhoods within Surrey are being looked at, which Dr. Johanna says is key.
So you can do it via area codes, you can do it via work sites, and target those people regardless of the age, because people who are working, who are essential workers, they cannot work from home, have to go to work.
And while the area codes aren't something the province plans to reveal right now, she says that could be the answer to the problem.
I think the direct ask would be just the transparency of knowing where the hotspots are, and then being able for the constituents of that hotspot, that area code, to be able to take in their address, their utility bill, driver's license, whatever, and get vaccinated.
And until more hotspots are targeted, she says now is not the time to get complacent, reminding everyone to mask up, keep apart, and stay at home. Zara Premji, CBC News, Vancouver.
And with restrictions on indoor dining expected to continue into May, the owners of a landmark restaurant in Surrey are throwing in the towel.
After 60 years, the Roundup Cafe is closing its doors. As John Hernandez reports, the family who runs the popular diner is disappointed they couldn't go out on their own terms.
It took a pandemic to shut us down, and it's disappointing.
It's another quiet day at Surrey's Roundup Cafe, the 40-seat breakfast diner limited to this small makeshift patio amid BC's circuit breaker restrictions.
You go from breaking even to losing money, a few days in a row, and not knowing when the restrictions are going to be lifted.
Hard times for a small business that flourished for more than 60 years. It opened in 1959, a time when this booming metropolis was in its infancy, the building one of the few remaining remnants of a different era.
Back in the 70s when the Dell and the Flamingo nightclubs were rocking and this place is open 24/7, a lot of people would come here after the bar shut down and have fries and gravy.
A piece of history owners say won't survive the once-in-a-century pandemic. With COVID-19 infections mounting, driven by a rise in variants, restaurants have been informed to expect an extension of the indoor dining ban.
You know, it is unfortunate, and I hear from people who work in those industries, people were doing their best, and in some cases it became very challenging. And yes, staff people were becoming ill, and people were pushing the limits.
Stakeholders call it another blow to the food and beverage industry, which has been on the ropes since the pandemic started. The province is giving up to $10,000 in grants to restaurant owners, but for many, it just isn't enough.
It's like the aunt who gave you a present for Christmas. You really appreciate it, but you sort of thought you could have done better. In the last 3 weeks, the first 3 weeks of this closure, it's probably cost the industry $500 million.
After more than half a century, the roundup is ready to take its final bow.
To keep losing money and try to think it's going to be over one day, pretty tough right now. So it looks like after all these years of being in business, that's probably what we'll end up doing is probably by the end of the month, yeah.
A pandemic that's claimed lives and businesses, with many more still at risk. John Hernandez, CBC News, Surrey.
One of Vancouver's most iconic attractions has been sold to a private American tourism company. The Vancouver Aquarium says the deal will save it from closing permanently.
Dan Burritt joins us live with more. Dan, who's the new owner?
It is Herschend Enterprises. This deal was signed yesterday, and they won't tell us how much they paid. COVID-19 has wreaked havoc on the Vancouver Aquarium. It's been closed throughout the pandemic, mostly. Oceanwise, which has run it since 2017, warned last year it would run out of money this spring. It laid off more than 200 staff. The nonprofit says it cost $1 million a month to feed and care for its 70,000 animals, so it started looking for a new operator in the fall and has found one now. As for those workers,
There've been no immediate plans to bring back a lot of staff at this time. We're still in a pandemic. We still need to be very careful about that. We're hoping to open as soon as we possibly can, but we obviously need to do that within the confines of all the restrictions that are going on right now. So,
Wright says he expects some employees will return. We just don't know how many right now.
And Dan, what more do we know about these new owners?
Yes, Herschend owns a dozen theme and amusement parks, water parks, and aquariums in the southern U.S., among other things. It partially owns Dollywood, the theme park named after country legend Dolly Parton. It also owns the beloved Harlem Globetrotters as well. And it manages a controversial park. Stone Mountain Park in Georgia has long been a gathering spot for white supremacists. It has the largest Confederate monument ever built, and protesters have long called for that carving of Confederate leaders to be removed. As for the Vancouver Aquarium, Herschend stresses locals will be in charge.
We're going to be bringing financial resources, creative resources, business process resources, and basically looking at us as an enabler or a support structure to allow the local management to do what they do best, and that's run a world-class aquarium.
As part of this deal, Herschend says it will donate 1% of annual gross revenues from the aquarium to Oceanwise to support its long-going conservation program. Anita, Mike?
Dan Burritt live tonight. Thank you. A man is dead and a woman is seriously hurt after an apparent attempted murder-suicide in Chilliwack. Chilliwack RCMP responded to reports of shots fired at a townhouse on Watson Road around 8:30 this morning. Officers arrived to find a man dead from his wounds and a woman suffering life-threatening injuries. Watson Elementary School across the road was on lockdown to allow the helicopter ambulance to land in the school's field.
We're just hoping for the mom to be okay. Hopefully she made it to the hospital. And it's tragedy, honestly.
According to the RCMP, the two were known to each other and there is no risk to public safety. The Integrated Homicide Investigation Team has now taken over the case. Anyone with information is encouraged to contact police or to remain anonymous. You can call Crime Stoppers.
A man has now been charged in connection with a high-profile stalking case in Vancouver.
A count of break and enter in connection to an incident that occurred on March 16th at a hotel on Broad Street. 1 count of assault with a weapon in connection to an incident that occurred on March 19th near Bute and Robson Streets, and 1 count of uttering threats in connection to an incident that occurred on March 19th near Bute and Robson Streets.
Video of the incident was shared on social media when a woman used her cell phone to document a man following her for about 40 minutes back on March 17th. 33-year-old Mohammed Majidpour has now been charged with 1 count of criminal harassment. The investigation led the other charges against the suspect for other incidents. The suspect is being held in custody.
A pulp mill in Mackenzie, BC is closing its doors, putting 250 employees out of work. Paper Excellence is blaming COVID-19 and a lack of local fiber supply for its initial shutdown in 2020. The company says small production capacity and low supply means it couldn't compete globally. The town's mayor says the closure is not a big surprise and adds former employees will receive severance packages.
A reminder of a painful past in northern BC will finally be torn down after 45 years of lobbying by Indigenous leaders. The former Lower Post Residential School sits just south of the Yukon border. From 1951 to 1975, it was a residential school, and that it remained in use despite the pain that people experienced within its walls. Now it'll be demolished and replaced with a new multi-purpose cultural building. The federal and BC governments will pay $13 million for the project.
It is really the day to celebrate the Deludena, the Kaska, the Tahltan, and the Taku River Tlingit for persevering.
This event can lead the way for Canada because all of Canada needs to heal from this.
I'm truly excited to go and visit the building when we can start gathering again. I'm very proud of everybody that's contributed.
Well, it may just be April 15th, but wildfires are starting to pop up here in BC. A 6-hectare grass fire you can see here is out of control near Highway 1 in Chilliwack. BC Wildfire has crews on scene and a helicopter to bucket the fire. Fire officials are warning the conditions on the ground are extremely dry. There are 12 active fires in BC right now.
And meteorologist Johanna Wagstaffe joins us now. Joe, it feels kind of early to be talking wildfires, but as you've been pointing out, it has been very dry. So does that mean that the season has actually started?
Yes, I think we can officially say it is wildfire season in British Columbia. It did not take long, just 5 days of dry weather and building heat. I've been watching this Chilliwack fire situation. I want to show you the latest weather conditions on the ground. Playing a major role today. You mentioned how dry it's been. Winds have been gusting from the northeast for most of the day. We've been seeing gusts upwards of 40 kilometers per hour. Those outflow winds, that's what's been delivering the heat from the interior to the coast and also fanning that fire. And temperatures right now around 25 degrees. We're seeing a shift in the winds. They're coming from the west now. So that will lead to some erratic fire behavior. Relative humidity also below 30%. So we have ideal fire conditions, and that's something we'll be watching as we head into a continued hot and dry forecast thanks to this locked weather pattern, this high pressure not going anywhere until Tuesday, as we keep saying, but new forecast guidance shows that Tuesday really just being a blip before we continue with the dry weather until possibly next Thursday. A quick look at the current temperatures out there. You can see Abbotsford at a 22, seeing much warmer conditions in the valley, again, thanks to those outflow winds, and much cooler towards the water. We hit a 17 at YVR. I'll show you some records later on. Watching that fire danger rating, though, as I mentioned, already in just 24 hours, seeing some pockets in the Prince George Caribou region up around the moderate level and some pockets of high in through the interior. So I'll keep you posted on that side of the story, but we will certainly talk more about how lovely the warm temperatures have been and that will continue right through the weekend. I'll keep you posted.
All right. Thanks, Joe. The sky-high price of lumber is not only affecting home builders, but artisan woodworkers, too.
One Burnaby artist who builds customized furniture for her clients uses the leftover wood to make smaller pieces that benefit the community.
But as video producer Kevin Lee shows us, the artist worries high prices will scare people away, which will have an effect on her charitable projects.
The cost of materials have skyrocketed. They're about 3 times the price that they were this time last year. My margins, I already run fairly tight with them anyway. So the problem that I'm having now is that with the availability of material, the cost of material, I'm starting to get into that prohibitive price range where, you know, people are they're thinking twice before they want to commit. For the most part, like, I work a lot in standard, it's called SPF, which is spruce pine fir. So that's your standard lumber that you pick up at any of the big box stores, mainly because it is a little bit cheaper than the hardwoods. So it's a bit more affordable, cost effective. I've teamed up with 9-year-old Tegan, who is an amazing artist. We're going to be building some step stools. She's going to be doing the painting on the top. The money is going to be going to the Artisan Fund for pediatric transplant research. If I start seeing my client base dwindle and my projects dwindle just because of the cost of wood, that means that I'm going to have less offcuts to be able to continue on with this.
Just some nice work, doesn't she?
Absolutely. Hopefully things change. We'll see what happens.
Okay, just a quick reminder, you can also watch this newscast live on the free CBC Gem app.
CBC Vancouver is also on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram.
Well, the projections on new COVID cases in our province are troubling. But just ahead, the new modeling that paints a dire picture of what could be coming in Ontario.
Thanks for staying with us during our commercial-free live stream. Well, Toronto, like Vancouver, is home to diverse people and, as a result, diverse cuisine. A couple of young foodies want to put that to the test.
They're challenging themselves to eat a meal from every country in the world in the Greater Toronto area. Talia Ricci sat down with the couple over Egyptian food to learn more about it.
We have a Global Eat series in Toronto where we're basically trying to find every country's cuisine in the GTA.
Our biggest dish is kushari, a very popular dish in Egypt. Rice, lentils, pasta, sauces, caramelized onions, really good. Guaranteed to lift your mood.
Thank you so much, Amber. Appreciate it.
All right, I think we're picnic ready. Yes. Where are we traveling to today?
Today we are traveling to Egypt. We were just on the Danforth at the Papyrus restaurant and really excited about this plan that we have.
Okay, I'm dying to dig in, so I'm gonna have a falafel. What gave you the idea to do the Toronto Global Eats Challenge?
Well, I would say it starts with food just being such a big part of both of our lives. So without the ability to travel, without the ability to dine in, we were just thinking of different ways in which we could, one, still be able to eat lots of delicious food and kind of make COVID a bit more fun, a bit more bearable, but also shine light on cuisines that probably don't get attention or aren't well represented.
So we're on a mission to find every country's food in the GTA. So today we're getting Maltese food at Nanu's Pastizzi.
And so how are you sharing the spots that you go to, and what has the response been like so far?
Predominantly it's on our TikTok, so we make basically a TikTok episode per country that we visited, and then we also have a blog where he writes a more in-depth, detailed article about the actual cuisine, the restaurant that we visited. Some of our videos, for example, Belgium is over 500,000 views. Today, we're getting proper Belgian waffles at Lekker.
No, I was just and in the comments also, what's been really cool is people are recommending spots for their home cuisine or even other cuisines.
Do you think that you will be able to find every country in the world in Toronto?
He made a giant Excel spreadsheet that has every country in the world and then did research on, okay, with each country, can we find a restaurant per country? We've managed to get to about 130.
What do you hope people think or feel when they come across your channel?
We definitely don't want to come across as, experts in every cuisine. I guess what we really want to show with this series is that all cuisines deserve to be tried, all cuisines, deserve to be learned about, and just kind of change the perception that there's something cool to explore with every country's food. And also Toronto is just such a great place to do that.
So I was a bit skeptical. I was not sure that they could find a Georgian restaurant in Toronto, but a little Googling tells me that they do exist, so
Wow.
cool initiative.
That would be a good assignment. Just make your way through all those restaurants, no matter where they are. That would be not good for the waistline, but...
No, but I'm feeling a little inspired to do it here. We'll see.
Exactly, we should. Okay, back in just a sec. More on COVID-19 from other parts of our country. 6:24, a live shot of the harbor tonight.
New COVID-19 modeling paints a dire picture of what could be coming for Ontario by the end of next month.
Thomas Dagla tells us that province could see far more than 18,000 new daily infections and up to 1,800 people in intensive care.
Looks can be deceiving. Amid a province-wide stay-at-home order, Ontario construction workers are still at it. The government sending inspectors to 1,300 such sites to ensure COVID compliance.
When we see intensive care unit beds filling up, when we see the positivity rates increase across our community, we're all concerned.
Premier Doug Ford considering even stricter measures as public health issues this warning.
If we don't change what we're doing, things will in fact get worse.
And they're already grim, with new records of more than 4,700 new cases in a single day and 659 people being treated in intensive care units. Frontline physicians like Dr. Taslim Nimji fear a cliff edge.
We've been trying to address this with the transferring of patients to hospitals that have capacity, but as we see this number growing, what we worry about is saturating that capacity.
Even in communities largely spared till now, the third wave is worsening. Around Owen Sound, infections are surging.
Those would generate around 400 to 500 close contacts. That is a number that can challenge our capacity.
Desperately low on resources, Ontario is set to ask the federal government for more than 600 critical care staff. The Premier requesting Alberta and Saskatchewan send extra healthcare workers too. Already, though, there's this.
We do have a lot of vacancies, and so we do have the staff complement that can help.
With children's hospitals already accepting adult COVID patients, long-term care homes are offering up to 6,000 beds of their own. Among seniors, vaccination has meant far fewer deaths, but for others,
it's pretty safe to assume that there will be a rise in deaths from COVID-19 that are coming. It's just we've staved it off a little bit because those people are currently on life support in ICUs across the province.
There's little sign of hope except from vaccines and the promise that everyone's turn is coming soon.
That's Thomas Dagla reporting from Toronto tonight. Well, there are delays with the Moderna vaccine because of a slowdown in the quality assurance process.
As David Cochran tells us, that means a pushback on delivery to Canada, and that's left some provinces unable to meet their vaccination schedules.
The Moderna vaccine offers reliable protection from COVID-19, but the company that makes it is struggling to make reliable deliveries during a time of great need.
We've worked with Moderna and we've informed provinces.
Inform them that 1.2 million doses set to arrive next week will be delayed, pushed to the final week of April as Moderna struggles to overcome a quality assurance backlog in Europe.
The issues relating to Moderna's shipments are ones that we are following very closely, and I continue to press the supplier for information.
Moderna has struggled to meet delivery dates since January, the anxiety of each delay heightened by the third wave.
But we just need certainty right now, and it's absolutely critical. The Moderna shipment has been delayed now three times. We won't see Moderna for another couple weeks.
It's forced some provinces to scramble and rebook thousands of appointments with each delay, though not everywhere, as some provinces have accounted for the delays in their rollout.
There are provinces that only open up appointments upon confirmation of vaccines arriving in country. That is one way.
The Moderna doses will be late, but they won't be lost. To this point, Canada has received nearly 12.7 million doses from all sources. It's used about 9 million of those, which means there are nearly 4 million doses still waiting to be used and another 3 million doses set to arrive by the end of this month. David Cochran, CBC News, Ottawa.
Canada's telecommunications regulator is forcing the country's big three telecom providers to support more competition.
As Laura McKillen reports, the CRTC is ordering Bell, Rogers, and TELUS to offer wholesale network access to smaller third-party resellers.
Canadians' monthly cell phone bills rank among the world's highest. The big three charging big fees to stay connected. But now Bell, Rogers and TELUS will have to share their infrastructure with smaller regional players so they can operate in new areas. And customers are set to reap the benefits.
You'll be able to pick up a cell phone from a new company that gives you access to the same kind of range of services you would have from the big three, and probably at a lesser price sometime in the next, I'd say year, 18 months.
The decision is a result of a 14-month review from the Canadian Radio, Television and Telecommunication Commission. It was concerned about the lack of small, affordable providers in the wireless market. Now, such companies will be able to pay wholesale rates to access the big networks without paying to build or maintain the infrastructure. Then they can offer cheaper plans to mobile users.
The fact is rates have been going down, but they need to go down more. And we believe that this is the best model to ensure ongoing, meaningful competition that in turn will drive rates down.
During hearings last year, the CRTC heard pushback from the big companies dominating the industry. They warned that letting smaller carriers access their networks will remove the incentive to invest in upgrades. The telecoms say their revenues are taking a beating during the pandemic and that mandating access will deal a fresh blow to their finances. For others, it doesn't go far enough. This academic says the CRTC missed an opportunity to bring wireless carriers in line with disruptors in the home internet market.
They've cooked up this half measure and just continued on kicking that can on down the road.
It'll be some months before the details are finalised. In the meantime, the CRTC is telling the big carriers to get to work on new low-cost and occasional use plans and offer those to customers by mid-July. Laura McQuillan, CBC News, Toronto.
A warning now about disturbing images out of Chicago of another deadly police confrontation. It happened weeks ago, but the video has just been released.
A 13-year-old dead after being shot by a police officer. Katie Simpson shows us how it unfolded, and again, we do warn you, the images are disturbing.
The footage begins showing Officer Eric Stillman on his way to a shots fired call in the early morning hours of March 29th. He stops the vehicle after he and his partner see two people in an alley. Stillman tosses one person to the ground and runs after the other. That's when the sound kicks in.
Please stop! Stop right now!
The footage is blurry and fast-moving. But you can see the person being pursued stops and starts putting his hands up as the officer fires a single shot.
Shots fired, get an ambulance up here now.
Despite CPR attempts, 13-year-old Adam Toledo would not survive. The 7th grade student is being remembered as a funny kid who loved telling jokes and building things with Lego.
No parent should ever have a video broadcast widely of their child's last moments. Much less be placed in a terrible situation of losing their child in the first place.
A lawyer for Officer Stillman says Toledo had a gun, and police say a weapon was recovered at the scene.
And following this
But the Toledo family lawyer says whatever was in the teenager's hand was dropped before the officer fired a shot.
Adam, during his last second of life, did not have a gun in his hand.
Businesses in Chicago are being boarded up as the city braces for protests, like the demonstrations seen this week in Minnesota after police fatally shot Dante Wright. Former officer Kim Potter made a brief procedural court appearance on second-degree manslaughter charges in that case today.
Even as our understanding of this incident.
Aiming to prevent violence in her city, Chicago's mayor pleaded for peaceful expressions of grief.
And we all must proceed with deep empathy and calm.
Officer Stillman is on administrative duties for 30 days as an independent investigation continues. Katie Simpson, CBC News, Washington.
A dire prediction of 3,000 cases of COVID-19 by the end of May if British Columbians don't bend the curve. Why one modeler says the healthcare system can't cope if the numbers don't improve.
Finally, in the news portion of our broadcast, there are a lot of candles covering Vancouver's birthday cake today, 100 of them. It's the city's centennial, and as Karen Webb tells us in our feature report tonight, a lot of people are out celebrating.
Today it was party time in Vancouver. Just about everybody found a way to mark the city's centennial. Tens of thousands of people came out to enjoy the sunshine, ready and set to have a good time.
God bless you all. Have a great day.
The Government of Canada marked the occasion at the site of the world's tallest hockey stick. It unfurled the largest Canadian flag in the country. As a gift to Vancouver, it will fly high above Expo until the end of the fair. The city marked its own birthday with a huge cake cutting in Stanley Park. The recipe for the 1,200-kilogram cake starts. Take 15 sheets of plywood.
Happy birthday to us all. Doesn't it feel great to be 100 years old today?
Governor General Jean Sauvé wielded the sword for the ceremonial first cut. And when the balloons went up, Vancouver was officially 100 years old. In April of 1886, Vancouver was just a tiny place, barely 500 homes. Most of the locals still called it Gastown. It had a perilous beginning. 2 months after incorporation, the city was destroyed by its Great Fire, but within days the people began to rebuild. Vancouver was by no means the oldest or the largest settlement in the area, but the CPR had chosen it as the end of the line, and where the railroad went, the people went. A year later, the first Canadian Pacific train chugged into town. The city grew quickly, 10 times bigger by the end of '86. 3 years later, they laid the first streetcar tracks. 50 years after it was born, Vancouver had become a thoroughly modern metropolis. City Hall went up, and as a Jubilee birthday present, Stanley Park got a fountain in Lost Lagoon. Stanley Park itself is almost as old as the city. The federal government had set it aside as a military base, but in 1888, the city obtained it on a 99-year lease for use as a park. Stanley Park then wasn't much different from the huge stands of timber that bounded Vancouver. Today, it's a reminder of the way things were. Vancouverites think of it as their park.
Very few people realize. Most people are shocked. They automatically assume this is our park. After all, our park money goes into it and pays for its maintenance and development. But it comes as a complete surprise for most people. They really didn't know we don't own the park.
Some of the stories we're following tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
We were able to open the door for a few short months last summer. However, come the fall and unable to meet the mounting costs, we had to permanently lay off many colleagues and friends as there was simply no work for them to do. A very tough time indeed.
Vancouver Aquarium has been sold to a privately owned American tourism company. The move was made to avoid shutting down because of big financial losses. Oceanwise, which has run the facility since 2017, says it only managed this long without a sale due to financial aid and public donations.
BC is reporting 1,205 new COVID-19 cases and 3 more deaths. A record high in hospitalizations with 409 people currently in hospital and 125 people in intensive care. Case counts are among people aged 19 to 59, with clusters connected to workplaces and social interactions.
And BC could see up to 3,000 new COVID-19 cases a day by next month if we don't reduce the number of people we see. That's according to new modeling released by provincial health officials today. Deaths in BC have leveled off and decreased, but as we heard, case counts between people 19 to 59 are going up. Clusters are connected to workplaces and social interactions.
Not only could we see those high case counts, there are also warnings that hospitalizations could overwhelm the system here in BC if social interactions don't cool down. Let's get some perspective on what we're seeing. Killeen is head of a COVID modeling group here. She's also a mathematics professor at SFU. Thanks for being with us tonight.
Hello.
Now, this modeling was done before the recent round of restrictions. So how does that change the numbers, or is it not helping at all?
I think what we're seeing is that it hasn't quite been enough yet. The variants of concern have a higher transmission rate than the COVID that we were used to before. So they're just that much better at getting from person to person. And so that means we need to be using all the tools we have, including distancing, to really cut back on transmission as much as we can.
Well, so let's talk about that a little bit more. You mentioned distancing, but is there something else, 1 or 2 things that you think could really curb the spread before we get to that point?
So right now, the fastest thing we can do is stopping contact between people directly by asking people to do that in their personal social lives and also wherever possible in workplaces. The province has also been proactive about the deferred second dose, vaccinating as many people with the first dose as possible, and also with vaccinating high contact and high risk essential workers who have to have high contact at work. That probably won't be in pace in the next week or 2 to make a huge dent, but I think it is very proactive and can make a difference with transmission in the shortish term. And then the other tool I think we haven't seen as much of yet as I hope that we will is the rapid testing and just use of testing where we wouldn't have a PCR test. So not instead of PCR tests, but in addition to them, to get in front of transmission chains by finding people before they're showing symptoms or before they're able to infect others. So distancing is part of that, are regular things that we know work throughout the province. But I think we need to take a multi-pronged approach because the transmission rate increases in the variants are just high enough that it's going to be a problem.
So let's say that doesn't happen. Your group is warning hospitals could be overrun. If they are in fact overrun, what would that look like? How bad do you think it could actually get here?
Well, I don't know. I think we need to look at jurisdictions like Ontario that are a little ahead of us in the variant of concern curve in a way. I should also say it won't be the same everywhere in BC. BC is a big province and different jurisdictions are different. So the island may be seeing different circumstances and there may be some, air transfer or other transfers that happen or transfer of personnel. But I can't comment in too much detail on what that looks like in practice for the logistics.
Now, we hear a lot of people say there are fewer deaths happening, and sure, young people may account for more cases now, but they aren't getting that sick. So let's carry on with life. What do you think when you hear that?
I wish that I could say, yeah, that's right, because that is such an optimistic view. And in part, it is right. We have protected the people who are most at risk of death. And those were the tragedies that we saw in long-term care, really suggesting those populations had to be protected and are now largely protected through vaccination. So we wouldn't project that deaths would be as high now, of course, because of that. The problem is that young people are getting sick enough. It is less risky in young people, but it's not no risk. And so if you have a lot of cases around and the severity with variants is worse, that means the risk of hospitalization or needing ICU care are both higher in younger people than with the COVID we had before. And unfortunately, it doesn't balance out enough. It's not low enough risk in young people that it's okay to just proceed.
Killeen, thank you so much for your time tonight.
Thank you.
Scandal over Saturday's funeral for the Queen's consort, Prince Philip. The royal family turmoil that threatens to overshadow the day. Coming up.
And at 6:43, you're looking at a live shot down Cambie Street. Another sunny and warm day on the south coast. Gorgeous evening. What's in store for tomorrow and the weekend? Well, Johanna's forecast is next.
We are here in front of a typical ice house that you'll find on Rainy Lake, full of sawdust and full of ice. Many of the fishermen will often turn to an ice house. It's a lot easier than running back into town every second or third day to grab ice. In the winter, when it freezes up and they come and make ice, pull it up by sleigh, bring it to the ice house, cover it with a sufficient amount of sawdust. And they say it takes anywhere from a day to a couple days, depending on how much help you have and how much beer is flown. This ice house, if you put your hand in it, you'll feel just how cold it is. And we're dead middle of July, and it's a hot, hot day. So it's an effective way to keep your ice year-round. As you can see, it's just regular old sawdust. And as you go through your seasons, you have to turn the sawdust, I'm told. So, there's a bunch of extra sawdust here. As it gets used up, you'll rotate it because this will get wet and you don't want it to rot. Many of the fishermen use these to pack their fish, bring them into market. It has been around for a couple hundred years in this area, and it's the way that everyone does it. Under here are all of your blocks of ice. We're going to dig some out. Here's going to go down to the lake. I'm going to dunk it, clean it, and show you what the scraping is. This is the main block of ice that we pulled out of the ice house. We've got our scraper here. We're going to scrape our ice to pack our fish. Once you've chipped your ice, you can see here, this will all go on top of the fish, nicely pack into the fish boxes, and off to market the ice goes. It's a pretty incredible, simple, basic technology that works for everyone here on the lake.
Recently, we just finished a virtual online jigging contest, and it turned out really, really well. And our next project is to create this instructional videos on how to jig. We're looking for 4 individuals per community. So out of the Jig a Chick, Pork McPherson, McCrabick, and Music, we're looking for individuals to help us create some instructional jigging videos. So we have this online form going. Online application where individuals of all ages can apply, and if they're comfortable being on camera, check our page. We are called the Western Arctic Youth Collective.
We're getting new details today about Saturday's funeral for Prince Philip at Windsor Castle.
And while it's expected to be a somber memorial to the Queen's so-called strength and stay, as Renee Filipponi tells us, it's also expected to be touched by the recent controversy surrounding the royals.
Rehearsing with military precision to ensure everything is in order for the service, which will pay tribute to Prince Philip. The day will be filled with the Duke's personal touches, including this converted Land Rover he helped design, which will carry his coffin. Brigadier General Paul Doyle is the only Canadian taking part in the proceedings.
It will be extremely moving. It will be very significant. And everything is done in coordination and the wishes with His Royal Highness Prince Philip.
It will be different from other royal funerals in the past, such as the Queen Mother's. There will be no crowds, and no royal will be in military uniform, a decision made by the Queen.
She has intervened and made the decision that no one will be wearing military uniform, quite simply because it was proving too problematic.
It means Prince Harry won't be the only member of the family not in uniform. He was stripped of his military titles after stepping down from the royal family. There will only be 30 guests inside the chapel, including members of the royal family and some of the Duke's German relatives, all in masks and physically distant. The palace also confirmed Princes Harry and William won't stand shoulder to shoulder during the procession.
That is obviously going to throw up a whole new load of questions about the relationship. Is it really that bad that they can't stand side by side behind their grandfather's coffin?
In London today, Prince Charles and Camilla took in messages of condolence, thanking Prince Philip for his service, as the family prepares to wish him a final farewell. Renee Filipponi, CBC News, London.
Meteorologist Johanna Wagstaffe joins us now with the forecast. Joe, I'm thinking perhaps some records broken today. Looked pretty hot in some parts.
Anita, yes, you would be right. There are many records that we broke today across all of British Columbia, and in fact, south of the border too. The Pacific Northwest is sharing in this high pressure ridge, and a few in Alberta as well, but BC certainly taking the bullseye of this heat. Let me show you the records broken today, unofficial records so far. I'm sure we'll get an update from Environment Canada tomorrow morning. But from what I can see, Pemberton, almost 25 degrees on the island, seeing temperatures in Port Alberni close to 23. Squamish was the hotspot across the country yesterday at almost 27 degrees, following that again today. And Seattle, 24 degrees, which does admittedly sound a lot better when you say it in Fahrenheit. But yes, some good temperature records, and we'll likely see a few more fall as we head into a very warm weekend. Wanted to show you the big weather pattern. You can see that jet stream looping up across the province, sort of the green stripe representing the jet stream, that fastest band of moving air in the upper atmosphere that separates air masses and is also what's sort of stalled out across the west coast. So you can see Saturday is when I'm expecting to see the peak of the heat in through southern BC and the island. The interior, the peak is for tomorrow for you, coming down a degree or so as that high pressure system shifts westward. Still warm and record breaking across the whole province through the weekend and into early next week. A snapshot of the highs tomorrow across Metro Vancouver. Still getting into the low to mid 20s for parts of Metro Vancouver. You can see the greens and the temperature contour towards the water. So coming down a good 3 degrees by the water, but still very warm indeed. And that's all thanks to this big high pressure ridge, which holds right through Friday and into the weekend. We were watching, you can see that stripe of cloud up towards Haida Gwaii. That will slide down for Tuesday. But I think all we get at this point is cloud cover. We thought maybe the end of the sunshine might be Tuesday, but at this point it looks like we get to keep it until Thursday. We have one dog that's not sure about that long-range forecast. 24 in Kamloops and a 23 in through Kelowna tomorrow. You can see that heat really building all the way in through the Rockies and getting the heat in through Alberta as well. So I think the hottest temperatures for us will be Saturday, gorgeous through Sunday as well. Monday, same sort of story. It's Tuesday, Mike and Anita, that we'll start to see some cloud cover. But again, I don't think it's until Thursday that we get to see some rain. At that point, we'll probably want it.
Well, it sounds like Rodney's ecstatic about the forecast. Actually, that's a happy bark, right?
You speak Bernie's Mountain Dog. Yes, Mike, you're right. That was a happy bark.
All right, Joe. Thanks very much. Well, with long ties to aviation, Gander, Newfoundland has a lot of streets named in honor of aviators and planes. So why is the town changing some street names? That's coming up.
I'm here in Selkirk and I'm talking to Robin Kaspersky. She is the one who has come up with the winning design for the water tower here in Selkirk. Robin, I want to start off by asking you, how did you get involved in this?
My sister emailed me the RFP, and when I saw it, I just had a really good feeling about it. So I decided to enter 2 concepts.
Now, tell us about the concept that won. What does it look like?
Well, what you'll see when it's all finished is the Selkirk's 5 brand colors. There'll be a blue banner on the top, a slice of negative space right in the middle with the logo, and then bands of green, yellow, oranges, and some reds going down into the stem.
How did you come up with the idea to design it that way?
Well, the city recently went through a rebrand, and I really wanted to respect that and aid in the brand rollout. This is probably one of the biggest brand touch points that you'll see in any rebrand. So doing this would be a really big strategic position for the city to take, and I wanted to respect that. And my concept was to have the top be very visible from a distance, something that people can see and be legible from the highway, and really bring people in to the city to experience Selkirk. And on the base, I thought there was such a great opportunity to bring a community mural down.
And you grew up here in Selkirk, so what's that going to mean to you when you come to town and you're going to see your work on such a prominent space in the city?
Yeah, it's a little nerve-wracking, but you know, I think every time I come to town, it'll just put a smile on my face to see it.
Now, the work here, as we can see, is starting to get underway. They have the scaffolding up. How long do you think it's going to take before we can actually see the final project?
Yeah, I think you'll see the final piece peeking out of the top, and they start to take the scaffolding down this summer. So, I don't know, maybe July, August, something like that, if weather permits. I did a lot of research into the style of tower, the history as well. I'm just interested in it. And the use of it, like, it has to be visible from the highway, so I had the opportunity to make the logo bigger or smaller, but you know, it reads so well. You know, becoming a graphic designer was a really interesting choice for me. I wasn't sure if my passion for creativity would help me through my career, if that is something that would be feasible, but through the education I had in my hometown in Bathe, Manitoba, and in Selkirk here at the high school, it really became clear that graphic design is something that you can totally do, and you can totally make great money doing it and also be super passionate about something you love. So I'm really, really excited that I can turn that passion into and bring my skills back to the city and give back. So yeah, it's amazing.
Robin, it was so nice to talk to you. Congratulations on the winning design.
Thank you so much.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell. Here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox.
Join CBC Vancouver's Gloria Makarenko at the 2021 Because Mothers Matter Awards on May 5th. Celebrate the resilience of mothers during the global pandemic at this year's awards. And the Doxa Documentary Film Festival is May 6th to 16th. Enjoy thoughtful and engaging documentaries, panel discussions, and more, all from the comfort of your own home. Learn more at doxafestival.ca.
The town of Gander, Newfoundland has a long and storied connection with aviation.
Yes, from history-making flights to their response during 9/11. And that history is reflected on the streets, all of them being named after aviators.
But as Garrett Berry reports, that may be changing.
On every street corner, Alcock, Brown, Earhart, there's a little bit of history. Pioneering pilots and transatlantic adventurers live on in these street signs.
Well, essentially, the street naming policy in Gander pays tribute to Gander's aviation history, which is well known to many people around the world, actually.
Like Louise Sacchi, a ferry pilot who delivered hundreds of aircraft from the Gander airport, and Alcock and Brown, who made the first ever non-stop transatlantic flight.
So essentially, all the street names in Gander are, with a couple of exceptions, are named after aviators, and it's kind of a unique thing that tourists find interesting. That it's a unique fact about the community.
A bit of charm that's up in the air.
It's not something that we necessarily. There's a consensus that we want to do.
Town staff are now proposing a change to open up the eligibility ever so slightly, and the mayor is a bit conflicted. There is the charm factor, but Then again,
I would suggest that if you looked at a list of the names of streets here in Gander, the average person with the average level of knowledge about aviation would probably only recognize maybe 15 or 20 of those names.
History buff Jack Pinsent agrees. He moved to Gander in the early days, 1945. And at the very beginning, he says it all made sense. But as the town grew...
And there's some guys right now, I look at the name and I say, I never heard tell of that fella before.
Pinsent says there are others, non-pilots, who deserve some of that recognition.
John was from St. John, so he got on the train, come out to Gander. And he ended up being a confidential secretary to the base commander of the RAF Ferry Command.
Even if the policy does turn, it will only be slight. You'll still need to show some connection to Gander's historic aviation industry.
Connecting the street names all throughout this community to aviation is a fitting tribute and recognition of the heritage of our community, which is unique in the Newfoundland context.
Garrett Berry, CBC News, Gander.
I want to go there, for sure. It was certainly put on the world's map during 9/11 when dozens and dozens of planes had to land there, and the community totally embraced the people. So, yeah, great idea, but maybe time to change a few of the names.
See what happens. All right, you can always watch our newscasts online anytime, cbc.ca/BC.
Next local news, 11 o'clock tonight with Dan Burritt after the National. Enjoy the sunny evening in Vancouver. Have a great night.